All right, everyone, welcome back to Anti-Media Radio. This is your host, Jake Anderson, and tonight we're going to talk about, well, whatever comes to mind. Probably something called thought form, or tulpa. You guys ever heard of a tulpa? It's an idea I've been kind of into recently. Well, that's interesting. I wonder if you guys can hear my obnoxious neighbor playing his guitar and singing. Some people should just not sing, period. But anyway, I don't think you guys can hear it. But I've been kind of into this idea recently of a tulpa, or a thought form. And this gives me an opportunity to check in with one of my favorite weird sites, which is called Message to Eagle. So tulpa is basically an entity created in the mind. It possesses the ability to act independently of and parallel to your own consciousness. It is able to think, and has its own free will, emotions, and memories. In short, a tulpa is like a sentient person living in your head, separate from you. In order to understand the nature of a tulpa, one has to accept that a thought can have different purposes. It is also essential to recognize the basic concept of a thought form. Students of occultism learn that a thought can create a non-physical entity that exists in either the mental or astral plane. So this gets into some, kind of occultist stuff here, but the great scientist Jung believed in a kind of astral creation, and lots of scientists have dabbled in it. And it's worth debating seriously in the internet age, I think, because in the internet age, we're going to be creating a lot of different universes. We have to be careful that they don't become real. The most obvious example of this is Slender Man. So Slender Man was a created character, a horror character, that became so real to the people around it, that two girls actually tried to kill a classmate. I can't remember if they actually succeeded or not, but they basically stabbed this person a bunch of times, saying that Slender Man had told them to do so. But
the human psyche is so weird.
It is. It is very weird. And so we're joined by the one and only DB Schwartz. And DB, how you doing this week?
I'm doing all right, but I'm starting to see some of the Californication of Minneapolis here, and it's making us think about taking off again.
What do you mean?
There's Tent City popping up, dude. And it's just like, I don't know, man. It just sucks. It really just does suck, dude. It just sucks. I mean, anybody can be homeless. Anybody.
You're saying it's being gentrified and forcing people out of their homes?
I think that's part of what's going on, but it's just shit is tough all over, and I think people understand that it's not nearly as tough here, so they're flooding it to try to get into the benefits, and it's bankrupting our state. Like, the state had a surplus last year, and now we're in a deficit, and they're hiking the taxes to try to make up the shortfall. But the truth of the matter is that if the people at the top basically have a stranglehold on all the resources via the money, and everybody at the bottom's fighting over what's essentially, at this point, let's face it, it's barely getting by. And I just see it being a big problem, Jake, because there's people that are armed to the teeth all over this country, and when their lifestyles come crumbling down, like nobody's going to take any of the shit sitting down. Like, it sucks for you if you're unarmed when the shit gets bad. It's going to suck so bad for you if you're unprepared and you can't defend yourself. It's just going to suck, dude. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just thinking about that. I think yesterday because our power went out in our neighborhood, not all of Portland, just in our neighborhood. And I was walking around, and it kind of felt, I don't know, when the power goes out and people leave their homes, and it's kind of dark, and people have that kind of puzzled look about them. You kind of start feeling that apocalyptic feeling a little bit, and you start to wonder, how it would go down if there was actually, some kind of major event. And I realized, just how quickly it would descend into complete chaos. And it really would. I mean, if you think about...
They did a test, Jake.
Hmm?
They did a test. They did a test on various populations over time, mostly smaller rural communities that are more closely knit, because they wanted to see how quick things broke down, even among people that knew each other for years and years, maybe even their whole lives. And they found that, it took 9 missed meals, so 3 days, for people to start to compromise their established ethical and moral code. So in other words, they started to get hungry. And after 21 missed meals, so a week, people would literally kill somebody for food. So it only gets worse from there. Now, obviously, water, if you don't drink in like 2 days, you could die. So that's not, in places where that's a problem, like where I'm from, where all the water gets pumped in. Something could get worse than that really quickly because of water running out and bottled water, and then the taps don't work, and there's nowhere to go to get it, and it would become a crisis quick. And that's just what I see, man. So up here we have the extreme cold that in a way kind of serves as a buffer zone somewhat. I mean, right now it's unbelievably beautiful, but I mean, in 6 months it's going to be shit again. And it keeps people away, so to speak, and we have plenty of water. So I'm not as worried up here as I might be down there. But I mean, where you are as a cornucopia, it's on the coast, and the coast is always vulnerable. So I don't know, man. Everything's such a fragile supply chain. That's the biggest problem. It's like, at least you're good. You have farms all over Portland area, and we do too. But I mean, there's certain mega cities where I think they have to truck in at least like an hour or two. So those are going to be tough.
Yeah, I mean, it's, we're not really prepared. I think most people are not prepared in this country really for survivalist living. I certainly haven't received any training on that, and I realize, like, I don't have a stockpile of shit. I know my parents don't have a major stockpile. There's some people that plan that shit out. They would know exactly what to do the second a major emergency went down. They'd have an immediate plan. They know immediately where to go. Some of them we would even have a bunker they would go to. They'd have their firearms to protect them. Some people are just like, I don't know, secretly prepared for a zombie apocalypse or something. I don't know. I think, some people have a kind of death wish about that, where they feel disenfranchised or alienated, so they almost kind of secretly hope to watch the world burn while they sit in a place of comfort. I don't know. I think that's perhaps some pathology that we can diagnose at some point. People that want to watch shit burn, some kind of revenge complex or something. But then there's people that are just straight up want to be prepared, and they know how to do it. And if shit hit the fan, they'd be able to live wherever. They'd be able to go out into the wild and They'd know what berries to pick. They'd know how to filter their water so they didn't get poisoned. They would know how to hunt and catch food and cook it and carve it up. They would just know how to survive. And there's something to be said for that. There's a certain value in that. Knowing
I
how
don't think society is going to break down to that level. What I do think, though, is that if money, as we know it, and especially electronic ways of exchanging goods and services for some kind of dollar, if that breaks down, and then there's also a huge class of people in the U.S. and most of what we call the first world that are service-based workers, and they basically what they do is they provide something that's not needed. So they provide a want, and those people will not have jobs when things break down because those jobs that are wants will be replaced by needs. So what I mean is stuff like plumbers and electricians are going to be like virtual millionaires, and you'll have lawyers and, I don't know, probably my job that'll be worthless. And it's going to just change everything because there's going to be a reset, very, very soon, I think. I think everything's pointing to the fact that quantitative easing's got a shelf life. And I don't know how long. We always talk about this on our shows. How long can they push it? Like how many times can they keep cutting people's value? I mean, we're seeing now, Jake, I went to a new car dealership, and an economy car is $25,000 now, like a Honda Civic. And if you want to get like a nice truck, it's like 50. And that used to be half of that, not even like maybe 15 years ago. So over the last 15 years, more or less, if you haven't gotten like close to a double of what you're making, your buying power is a lot less. And I made probably more 15 years ago than I do now, speaking for the whole year in some ways. So just for the sheer hours I work now, it's stupid. So I don't know about you, man, but I feel like the economy's it's on the verge of implosion. The only people that aren't feeling it are people that have, recession resistant or proof jobs. I mean, otherwise you're bouncing back and forth, and then once you miss enough rental payments, you end up in Tent City, dude. I just see it. They're springing up everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, definitely. I think people are slowly starting to ask, basic questions that, kind of seem elemental and stupid at times. But then, you start, wondering, like, okay, the bills are more. Seems like we pay more for groceries. We pay more for rent. And I'm not just talking about inflation. I'm talking about the basic value. We're paying more for homes, paying more for healthcare, education. Pretty much across the board, we're paying a lot more. But are people really earning more money than they used to? I think they're earning less. I mean, isn't this supposed to be like one of the first generations to have less buying power than the one before it?
Well, you used to be able to do like a home, 2 cars, and a vacation home, and take 2 or 3 vacations a year, and pay for 2 or 3 children's colleges on one salary, and you could have a stay-at-home parent, and that was within the last like 3 generations. So, I mean, now if you don't have both parents working, it's amazing. You're almost for sure your child is in daycare or basically being parented by the state or television and the internet like 90% of the time because you just don't have any time. And that's what they want, dude. It's how they make 1984 a reality. It's a complete and total spectrum brainwash from the beginning of when you can begin to read and write till you're no longer useful. Probably at this point now in your 50s. If you haven't cultivated a career of sorts by your 50s and you're just going job to job, expect to just be, it's tough, dude. I've seen a lot of people. There's a lot of people right now working horrible jobs that are in their 50s because it's not because they don't have skills. It's because they're actually too expensive for this modern business model that, quite honestly, is just hyper capitalism that forces 90% of people into a socialist, communist subservience to the government to just survive, just to survive.
Yeah.
And I see it every single day that people are desperate for housing, desperate for jobs of any kind. Desperate, dude. They'll take anything. And if it's that bad here, imagine how unbelievably awful it is in at least half of the world. I mean, we're at a point where the only way to fix it's probably violent. It has to be. Because the people that run this world have such an iron grip on it, they would rather us all die than lose that. That they're so ungodly rich right now if we're all suffering so hard.
Yeah. No, it's it's one of the saddest things in the world when you go into like a gas station or something and the person behind the counter who couldn't be probably earning under $10 an hour, in their 50s or something like that. Now sometimes people, think they're going to retire and then something hits them hard and they have to go back out into the workforce. But I'm talking about, like you said, people that just never really found a career path and kind of jumped around and tried different things and it just never worked out. And I mean, that's that's really not much of an American dream when you're not doing what you want to do. I mean, clearly no one's working at a gas station because it's the joy of their life. It's what they wake up every day thinking about. Like, I want to make this gas station run better. And they're doing it for money. They're doing it to survive. And, really to make that work, I mean, you're going to have to be working like double shifts, 14-hour shifts. I mean, if you have a kid, I mean, good Lord. I mean, that's just, what a nightmare. And, that's how kids grow up, impoverished, physically eating junk all the time, which gives them mental problems. But then also, that's no way to grow up mentally either with a, kind of an absentee parent or, like you said, learning from TV and the internet.
The main thing, dude, is like I've been looking into it myself out here to try to start a family, and the main thing here is like if you're making a pretty good living right now and you have a spouse who's not, like, maybe they make half of what you do, they really should just be at home with the kids and they should be applying for all of 100% of the state's benefits. Like, I'm not fucking with you. If you're out there right now and you make $100K and your wife could make 40 at a job, she should just sit at home and suck on welfare and be with your kids. That's what everybody's doing, so why aren't you?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's going to have to be some kind of universal basic income at some point because,
the fact that I know people not having children because of cost while all these fucking dipshits keep having kids and sucking up welfare, fuck that. Give welfare to everyone. I don't give a shit. If you make $100K a year and your wife wants to stay at home, she should be able to, and she should be able to get that $40K in welfare like everyone else does.
Well, it's funny because we're going to end up kind of in a socialist system simply because hyper-capitalism fails.
But why should you be punished for still working?
No, I totally agree with you.
If you're working hard and you have a family and you want a nuclear family, the state should subsidize you just like they subsidize people that don't work at all.
And just the way they subsidize the banks when the banks fuck up,
Hell yeah. All you'd have to do is cut the military's budget by like 20%. And you could fund literally anything. And they could make that up.
I don't even think you'd have to cut it by 20%.
That's a huge amount. I mean, I'm serious. Like $100 billion ends poverty. And what's their budget? 700, right?
Well, yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying you wouldn't even have to go that intensely in order to feed people and stuff. But yeah, I mean, the problem...
I'm talking about like everybody in the entire country that would be a citizen So this is where citizenry would actually have a value instead of just nothing, instead of them just taxing you. If you were a citizen and it was some sort of way where you could lose that by being a douche, but they gave you all of your necessities, that would be pretty Roman. That would be pretty epic. People would maybe even buy into statism if it provided for you, but it doesn't anymore. We live inside of an empire where you can literally starve to death while somebody drives by in a car that's worth more than a house all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. Good point. Yeah, no, it's a sickness.
There's nothing wrong with working hard because you want more, but we're at a point where nobody who's a good person should suffer at all. Period. They should at least have their basics covered, or at least so heavily subsidized that even if they did a job at McDonald's, they could have a good life. Because not everybody's smart enough to do these modern jobs. But that's not to say they're a piece of crap. If you're a good person, you're a good person. I don't care what you do. And you shouldn't have to suffer. That's just my opinion in this state of humanity at this time.
Well, I think also at some point in the near future, the universal basic income is buying you the leeway and the levity to upgrade yourself. And I don't mean upgrade necessarily in terms of technologically, but use the universal basic income to prepare yourself intellectually for something for the future, so that you're keeping up a little bit. Because right now what we have basically is, technology is changing so fast that no one can keep up with this shit, dude. I mean, most people do not think like programmers and can't design algorithms and shit. They don't know how to keep up with this stuff. And most people don't even want to. Like, if you're an artist, I mean, I only learn about algorithms so that I can write about it. Like, I don't give a shit about using it. It's just not in my brain. Some people are built differently. And, you shouldn't have to, like your point is dead on, which is that we have the ability for people not to suffer. So there's no ethical justification for why it's happening. But I mean, we're so far off of, middle class suffering at this point. I mean, we're talking about, like you said, people starving in the streets.
I mean, how long would that last? I mean, it doesn't last long if you look back at history. How long does it last before what percentage of the population's life gets shitty enough? I don't know, man. It's a tinder keg. It's not like other countries where cops and military can just come in and roll people over. That can't happen here with the second. So we're literally like in a quagmire because, one, they can't really do a reset without a collapse. If they have a collapse when the second's still here, we could revolt and take over, because even though, yes, they have drones and tanks and all these toys, they can't just use it willy-nilly on everybody everywhere and hit through buildings and all that shit. It's guerrilla warfare. So, yes, an armed 350 million people populace could win a guerrilla warfare against it. It wouldn't even matter how advanced your technology is. As long as we're fighting other humans that we can actually shoot and kill, then yes, we can win.
But dude, I mean, I agree with you, but I mean, it's not going to be all 350 million against the state.
It doesn't need to be, though. I mean,
it'll be partitioned. People will factionalize. They'll hurt each other.
We'll have a civil war before that happens. So what I'm thinking, what they're mitigating or attempting to mitigate, because it's such a massive undertaking to rebuild from, is to not repeat a Civil War 2.0, but there's elements within the what I like to call legacy intelligence apparatus, the people that basically controlled the Chinese gold after World War II, that like to pretend they're in charge, but they're not anymore. They still run their little agenda, dude, and it's just, I don't know if you've been watching shit like MTV Music Awards or any of that bullshit, but they're just straight up brazen now, like, yeah, we're pretty much evil fucking bastards, you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I do think there will be another civil war, at some point. And
But how long will it go? And it'll be short.
I wasn't convinced of it until this election and the aftermath of it. But the vitriol and hatred between certain elements of the left and right. Interestingly, it's not the traditional left and right that is worrying me. It's the more fringe radical elements of the left and right, for whom there is just simply no possibility of consensus. It's just so diametrically opposed viewpoints of the world that and normally our quote unquote democracy is able to kind of sustain these different outlooks, but it's inevitable that there is going to be a constitutional crisis that is such that we simply cannot get out of it. It just keeps snowballing and gets worse and worse and worse. And I mean, I really think of there's a very good possibility it could have to do with Trump, because Trump there has never been a singular issue that I've seen, at least, that has so divided us to the point where people on the left and the right are calling for the possibility of revolution. If they, and I don't know how it's going to go down, but I do know one thing. I'll tell you how it could easily happen. If there was, let's say, if there was an assassination, no matter who, it wouldn't even matter who did it. It wouldn't even matter. And then that week, there was a terrorist attack, and it wouldn't even matter if it was real or a false flag. It wouldn't even matter. You go into martial law with that kind of division that happened beforehand. If Trump goes down and there's a terrorist attack that week and we go into martial law, it's over. It's over. We'll never come back from that. And that's all it would take.
And then what?
Well, I don't know what would happen next. That would be
big question.
That would be uncharted territory right there.
And I can see it happen. I think there's so many things, like this Anthony Weiner indictment that came out today, or yesterday or whatever the hell it was. They're gonna wrap people up. They're gonna roll up the last 5-6 presidential, establishment people. They're gonna erase the last 5 decades, dude. I mean, everybody that was in power since JFK shot, everybody that's associated with that in any way or attached is going to be just basically eliminated, I think.
Yeah, I just have trouble believing that, because I think so many of them, they're so interwoven through all these different agencies.
They're the wrong side, though.
Yeah, but that's exactly my point. Is there are no clearly delineated sides right now.
There are now. There are now.
No. It's I think.
Are. Well, you just said there's going to be a civil war. There are sides now. There are sides.
Part of that civil war is going to come from simply confusion over who is who.
Well, yeah, but I mean, there's going to be a pretty equal, easy to understand dividing line.
People like me, I'm not a Trump supporter, but there's no way in fucking hell I'd be standing on the side of the
Hillary-ites.
I wouldn't be standing by them, but
that's the
kind of thing that turns brother against brother, man, and that's what happened during the Civil War.
That's what happened this election, is people that they don't even talk to their family anymore now. I mean, it's stupid. Neither side is good. If you think either side is good, something's wrong with you. These people want to take away your freedom. They want to make make your life even shittier than it already is. Dude, the people that want you to literally pretty much just give up and die backed both sides. It didn't matter if Trump won or Hillary. They wanted Hillary to win because Hillary would have made it easier to bring in the future they want. Now to bring in the future they want will take a war, which anything can happen with a war. The other way was just going to be with a whimper. Seriously, it was just going to be people will just microchip and get it stuffed up their ass because they're Hillarites. But I mean, now we're just going to fight. We're going to have that big war now. That Depop event, I guess they've wanted so long. So I don't know, man. I mean, they're setting it up now. Now North Korea what doesn't want to negotiate. Now their offers off the table. I keep seeing it going back and forth.
Yeah, that's the
I
latest. Is
mean,
that, and
it's stupid.
it's so
It's
stupid. It's like we don't like
stupid.
why like there
We,
because
dude,
North Korea is saying that the U.S. and South Korea are running military drills. Well, fucking no shit. Of course they are. Well, I mean,
well, yeah.
we're missing. I mean, as usual, and it's absurd to think we're ever getting even close to the full story. We're just missing too much of the story here to know
Their
what's.
reactor site, the place they were pretty much getting all of their uranium from, it was sabotaged. All right, so it not only was it sabotaged, but it was opened up, so it became like a big dirty bomb gash. All right, in the middle of a mountain, and within 20 miles, everybody's basically getting cancer. So it created a thing you can't come back from, because their whole thing was that they could create nuclear weapons. Whether or not their ICBMs would ever work didn't matter, because they could at least make nuclear mortars, and that meant they could level like basically South Korea. And if you look into how the world's economy is structured, South Korea is like the third most powerful economy in the world. So it goes Japan, China, South Korea, and then the United States as a whole. If Europe was a whole, it'd be number 4, but it's not. So Europe's, divided up a lot. I actually think 5 is Brazil or something like that. So you have to look at GDP, the output, and everything. So why are Japan and Korea so ridiculously powerful? Because they control the new economy. They're at the very forefront for AI, for the internet speeds, for robotics, for engineering, for automation. The people there basically they're so bored and so content that they kill themselves all the time in both countries, because it's so there's like no drive there for some of them to do what, and they're not having kids, so their populations are in reverse. So I mean, people need to understand. They think China's number 1. They're 2, way behind Japan for how much real assets are owned. And the world runs through those 3 countries. That's the economic triangle, and we're the enforcer for that triangle. That's what people need to get. We're their enforcer. So whenever things in that part of the world's economy screw up, we have to go fix it. That's why we're in the Middle East.
Right, but I mean, what does that? I mean, so what you're saying is, if you think about it, with North Korea, that would have been the best chance. That would have been the best time for a sneak attack, for a surprise attack, is right after they got together and held hands and everyone kissed and made up, and that big ceremony. That would have been such a good time for a sneak attack. What country were you talking about? They were saying that they were exposed. Was that North Korea or South Korea?
Well, South Korea is always exposed. At any time, North Korea could level it.
No, but who was at risk of having cancer outbreaks from their?
Oh, North Korea's they're complex. North Korea's got a massive amount of uranium. I think at this point in the world, because a lot of it was tapped, they maybe have the biggest reserves. I don't know, but they have a huge reserve. And it was a complex during World War II and before called Chosun, and it was like a combination uranium mine and then a hydroelectric power plant. That there's so much snow melt in the mountains of North Korea, it comes down and just creates endless electric power. So you have this great mine site with endless energy to do everything you need to get that uranium out. So that was what made Japan a super powerhouse during the time building up to World War II, because they controlled the entire peninsula, including that Chosun complex and Manchuria. But after the Korean War, pretty much what looks like happened was like the old school CIA that took over the gold from China after World War II. They like became entrenched in Pyongyang, and so in other words, the Korean War was like kind of this spillover of World War II and the official end of it. and it was actually officially sanctioned under the United Nations. So like the United States Army, Navy, Air Force, none of them took part in it. It was just the United Nations, our contributions to them. So the people that died in the Korean War get buried with like United Nations regalia and stuff like that. And that's a lot of that's just a lot of neither here nor there. But what it did was it was that the OSS essentially kind of like they never really ended, you know, the original CIA. They kind of created these, I don't know, satellite states that they controlled, like North Korea, and then they overthrew the president of Iran and installed the Shah, and that was one of those puppet states. And
that was like in 1946 or something.
Yeah, and Israel, of course, was created as kind of like a shield or a puppet state or a satellite state. And so all of these things combined kind of created this framework for the deep state, which was, you know, it was basically the British Empire and America. And the people that after World War II had ended had this enormous stockpile of gold because China asked us to store it for them because they were afraid of Japan invading all the way down into their basically interior and taking, you know, everything. So they took, you know, a ridiculous amount of gold. I think it was like 2,000 tons or some stupid amount of gold, like more than the whole world's gold in one thing. And
didn't China ask for that gold back recently? And
yeah. Well, no, they were supposed to have it returned on 9/12/2001.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah. So what did it do? Like, so it creates this thing where you're like, all right, so you're the military. You already know that these guys, these like industrialist dudes, these kingpin guys, basically have tried to take over the government before, and then there's a General Smedley Butler who blew the whistle, and nothing happened. It just prevented it from happening where the government was bought. And like, so, but they created this compartmentalization where they made it so that no 4-star general could ever be touched again or given orders or influenced by a bunch of dead men switches between all these 4-star generals of all these branches. So at that time, there was Army, Navy, and that was it. It was just the Army and the Navy, and then the Marines weren't even a thing yet. So they were like, all right, all of our 4-star generals are completely, they could be basically bribed or threatened, or you could kidnap their wife or threaten their kid or poison them at any time. Like, how can we make it so that these dudes can't be got to individually? And so there's this huge program they created for that, that's airtight to this day. That meant that the U.S. military basically during this whole time, I mean, even with JFK getting killed, was 100% completely insulated and in control, and like allowing it to happen, almost like they were like allowing this narrative to unfurl so they could step in now and just take complete control. Like, hey, you idiots, you stupid ass population allowed unbelievable corruption to occur. We're taking over for your own good.
And that's what you think is happening right now,
as we speak.
Well, and do you think Trump is aware of this or has no idea?
He's installed.
Right, but does he know that?
Absolutely.
Well,
it's a coup d'etat against the public. So people need to get that the government's never been your friend, per se, at the very top. But on a state level, we could have taken control at any time. And because we did not, it created this window for another group to come in and create a coup d'etat against us. Because if the government's taken over, like you said, through emergency powers during wartime, in the open, not just in the background like they do with various things like income tax, but if they actually just came out and said, we know everything you did, we have your entire online profile, we know you broke the law X amount of times, you're looking at 200 years in prison, or you do what we say. It's going to be simple stuff like that, dude. It's just a massive psyop they're waiting to unfurl. And once they do, once you have complete control over the U.S., it is possible to begin that insane dream of world control.
Well, how about that?
The Fourth Reich begins.
Yeah, I don't even know what to say about that. I mean, nothing would surprise me at this point. But it is interesting to think of it like a Matryoshka doll, just these like different nested.
Well, who's Trump, and who are these new bloodlines that have come in and taken over? And can we just follow where the families are from? These are different lines that have taken over. I'm not telling anybody out there that there's anything positive about what's going to happen. There's just going to be opportunity because there's going to be something new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a shift that went on. But, yeah, I mean, I just, it's hard for me to imagine that wow, I mean, they really pulled a fast one over there on the media then, because no one saw it coming. No one saw Trump winning. But that's nuts. It's nuts.
Well, who are some of his biggest donors, and what do they control? I mean, they control basically the internet for the most part, a vast swath of it, and they also control the biggest processing power plant in the entire world in Vegas, with basically every single video gambling machine that's not being used is mining Bitcoin, and it's doing it using free hydroelectric from the Hoover Dam, and then they have also now the most solar panels per square mile in the world. And yeah, I mean, the old money couldn't react, wasn't able to react in time, or they're just like, things were so good for so long. Like for like 100 years, things have been so sweet for like these oil families, the Standard Oil breakup families, that they couldn't even imagine losing power, but they got surpassed because the new economy is about electrical energy, not fossil fuel. So Bitcoin's actually money because it's electrical energy, because it takes electrical energy to create blockchains. So yeah,
that's a good point. I was arguing with not arguing, but I was discussing blockchain with a guy, and I was trying to explain to him where the value of Bitcoin comes from, and I was explaining it as potential value in the future. But the reality is, you're right, it is it's units of an electrical grid, basically.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hyper complex code that, I mean, there's an advantage to having hyper complex code that humans cannot crack, and only AI can, because they always leave a signature when they do so that fraud becomes instantly traceable. It's going to be a really strange future. I guess it's going to be up to people that aren't complete nincompoops to like make sure that the rest of the humanity is not taken advantage of, because I'm sure they will be. But I mean, in the future, it's going to be even easier if you're in control of, virtual anything. I mean, if you have a virtual bank, can't you just make money out of thin air? I mean, already they can quantitatively lend at 1 to 10 ratio, meaning if you have $1 million in the bank, you can lend 10 million and collect interest on that. So I don't know if anybody has $1 million cash, they might want to think about opening their own bank in some small podunk stupid town. But I mean, that's just the way it is, dude. It kind of sucks. It's always been this predatory nation, and it's even more so now. So much so that I'm doing deals now with people from other countries. They're just buying us up. So, I mean, I hope people understand what's happening, especially in these big cities.
I assure you they don't. I mean, no, people don't. They have no idea what's going on. The reality of what's going on is so many steps ahead of what average people are thinking about on a day-to-day. And like you were saying at the beginning, that's behooves them that while we're toiling in little matters of rent and our daily concerns, they're crafting these derivative schemes, and they're crafting these highly complex algorithmic structures for how to divide up the world's wealth. And it's like, who can compete with that? And now we're gonna have to try and understand artificial intelligence and all that shit. I mean, it's gonna be a weird future, man.
Yeah, it's gonna be. I was talking to somebody today that has the wherewithal and intelligence to understand where things are going and the resources to invest in the way they think the world's going. And I mean, they said straight up, Honda's got a robot right now that does household chores, and it costs $200,000. And I was like, "Are you kidding?" They're like, "No." I looked into it. It costs $200,000. It updates for life. It's got a lifetime warranty. The size of a small child. It's like 3.5 feet tall. It'll learn. The battery supposedly will last for 80 years, so it'll live for the life of a human. Even if you buy it at 20, it should last till you're 100, right? So $200,000, and it does everything, and it continuously learns, and it washes dishes, does your laundry, cleans everything. It provides security at your house. And they're like, I'm going to order one. I actually can afford it, so I'm going to do it. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. And they're like, it's a giant Roomba now, but I mean, in 10 years with continual upgrades, it's going to be like worth way more than $200,000. And that's the way it's going, Jake. The people that are investing in the cutting edge stuff now, they're going to be so far ahead of you in another decade. They're going to have a robot that's going to eliminate all of their time-consuming chores so that they're free to either make money or enjoy that money. That's all they're going to do. Doesn't matter. This person's a freak just doing loans, dude. That's all they do. They just sit at a computer and talk to people all day. They're going to have a freaking robot at their house doing their chores so that when they get home, they don't have to do shit. I mean, it'll mow your lawn. It'll do everything, dude. And it's now.
How is this little robot mowing a lawn? I've never seen a robot mowing a lawn.
Yeah, it can do everything, dude. Everything.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's going to be. I mean, that's gonna be the future. I mean, these household assistant bots are going to be the future, and eventually they'll be human-like enough emotionally that we'll probably end up having relationships with them. I can see that happening easily within 20 years, if not sooner.
She made a great point because she said, I know what I make an hour when I'm at work. Sometimes I leave work to do stuff at home. Now I won't have to. So if I can work 10 more hours a month, then I can pay this robot off in X years. I was like, what?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to look at what robot you're talking about. I mean, it makes sense though. I mean, how much time do we waste on the minutia of everyday life? You know?
I mean, if it's continually upgrading, essentially it could serve as a driver of a car in the future, and then now you can work while you're going to work, and it can drive your car home and do chores and come back and pick you. I mean, it's endless,
It could
dude, and,
also be. It could. I mean,
and it's a
that's.
century.
But it's a there's a danger in that too because technology is changing so dramatically and constantly. It could easily be that it shifts to a little bit more of a different thing, and that robot really isn't compatible with that.
Well,
That
yeah,
shift.
but I mean, if everything's working as it should, it's going to give people that are the working wealthy a competitive advantage that people that are not cannot meet. They cannot possibly compete. Just can't do it.
What if you just live in filth and you just don't worry about cleaning anything?
I don't know, man. I just your zen will suffer, and you'll definitely just get depressed. I know that. Some people maybe don't care, like hoarders, but
Yeah.
when shit gets dirty, your productivity goes down. I mean, the name of the game at the upper echelons of specific jobs where you're making, when you're making on a bad day $50 an hour, but on a good day like 200, and if you're working your ass off and some stupid robots keeping you at work to make that $500 more, and you do that enough times, it knocks that 200K out quick. I mean, these are people that are making $1,000 every maybe 3 or 4 hours. Seriously, like if they can just pull a loan, make it grand. Pull another one, make it grand. Make $2,000 a day every fucking day. Make $1,000,000 a year. What's a $200,000 robot when you can make another $200,000 in a year? It's paid off. So it's crazy, dude. It's gonna be like that, and the people that are at the real top, that are the people that have 5 million plus in the bank and it's invested correctly, where they never have to work. I mean, they're just gonna pull away like you can't even believe. Like they're in a Corvette and we're in a freaking like Geo Metro.
Yeah, they won't even be on the earth for that much longer.
Yeah, I mean, I know they're already talking about that, aren't they? They're saying yesterday they could terraform Mars in 60 years if they had to.
Damn, that's nuts. Like given an atmosphere?
Yeah, I mean, it would be like a polar condition, but they're like, well, we'll just build underground then, so no big deal.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if you've read Kim Stanley Robinson. He did a whole series on red Mars, green Mars, blue Mars. And, I mean, that was shit. That was written in the 90s. But, yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if think about how much money there is in terraforming a new planet if you can settle it. Because we're going to need places for people to settle soon.
Yeah, I mean, if everything goes best case scenario, we will need somewhere to move. Once we get to about 12 billion, I think they said it'll start to get a little squeamish for everybody. No matter how efficient we get, just that's kind of the carrying capacity that they can envision. They said maybe like an upper limit would be 20, but we're at probably about 8 right now. I mean, there's no good census in half the world, so I don't know, man. I mean, we're gonna have to do something. We have to do something, and I don't want them to depop. That sounds shitty.
Yeah, I mean,
we're gonna have to do it at some point in me and your lives, because it's 800 million people are born every decade. Or sorry, 800 million people add to the population every decade. So if we assume we're closer to 8. I mean, even best case scenario, if in 50 years we're getting to that like decision time, we'll be old men, but we'll probably still be here. That's gonna suck.
Yeah, hopefully I'm gonna be like high on like a high tech like morphine drug drip.
You're
There'll be like
gonna have a brave new
there'll be
world,
there'll be
elderly.
I'll be in a virtual reality environment, high on morphine with nanobots massaging me. You know?
Yeah, you're gonna be in a 2D. You're gonna be like in a hentai
Yeah,
2D, like Sailor Moon.
I'll be in unspeakable levels of debauchery in a virtual environment.
Yes, you'll be. You're gonna be like Kurt Tentacle Eichenwald,
Yeah,
Super Octopus.
right. Yeah, no, I don't mind that future. I mean, I can deal with that. I'll just say my goodbyes and be done with it.
Well, hey, it's always fitting to end a poetic life with a whisper.
With a whisper. Yeah, a whisper of pleasure as the new morphine drip gets installed. Now,
What do you
but
think about waking up from a cryogenic experience? I'm wondering what's going to happen with all these people that froze themselves.
God, yeah, that would be nuts. That would be nuts if they're able to figure that out.
All these rich D-bags come back to life. Hey, did great in investments in the 50s and now I'm back, bitch. You kept my head around for like 50 years.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if those initial cryogenic ones will pan out, but I'm sure some of the technology out there now may be good enough to, they're saying that if you can basically not freeze, but if you can kind of take a snapshot of your brain chemistry, or I don't know, I can't describe what they're saying, but who knows, man? Who knows what they're going to come up with? But it's a freaky idea, waking up like 100 years in the future. All right. Well, that was fun.
That was an interesting one.
All right, everyone. I'm going to a UFO festival.
Awesome.
I'll talk about that next week. All right, everyone. Take care. Go and let it blow through the stereo. I'ma let them know through the stereo. Yo, here we go through the stereo.